Malenko, you claim to be the man of 1,000 holds, but I counted, and you know about 60, but I know 1,004, and I wrote them all down. Here we go.
All right, so as you can see in this video, we're celebrating Chris Jericho in his 1,004 holds.
Exactly. Let's just jump straight into it.
Yeah, so we got 97 fall brawl against Eddie Guerrero.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it was this match when I was rewatching the matches that Mike Tenay talked about these guys being on the undercard.
Well, I did notice a trend here. All these matches we talk about tend to be the first match on the card.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
well, it just goes to show you that WCW put their best wrestlers, actual in-ring wrestlers, at the beginning of the card.
Yeah.
And you had guys like Hulk Hogan and Goldberg in the main event.
Right.
With some exceptions, of course.
Yeah.
But this was the trend back then. If you wanted to be over with the fans and make the big money in WCW, you had to be one of the big names. You didn't get that far with just wrestling ability alone, with some exceptions. And that's the thing. The WWE would take these guys that were on the undercard in WCW, and they would become main event stars in the WWE. It makes you wonder, how much credit does WCW deserve for these guys later becoming big stars? You could argue maybe they weren't ready yet, but I mean, then again, you know, with like Chris Jericho, you could see very early on some character traits that leads to becoming a big star. So this first match with Eddie, like I said, Mike Tenay mentioned, you know, the undercard. And I was thinking to myself that, you know, we're talking about Eddie Guerrero and Chris Jericho, two of the biggest names known today. Of course, hindsight's always 20/20, but these guys would have become main event stars. But in WCW, they were the very bottom of the card. And this match with Eddie, I know you said that this was the only one you had time to see, but my goodness, was it not a great match?
It was fantastic.
Arguably, Chris Jericho's best WCW match. The other two matches we're going to bring up are close, especially the Malenko match. I think the Eddie match was the best match of the card. The thing that you could see with Chris Jericho was that he could hang out with the luchadors. You'll see that definitely in his match with Juventud.
He did wrestle in Mexico.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, you would have to hang with the luchadors if you're going to do that. He could wrestle a traditional technical match. He could hang out with the luchadors. He could do it all.
They did plenty of technical spots in this match.
Yeah, they did. They did. It was just a wonderful match with two guys that would become huge stars later in their career and go on to the WWE and do bigger and better things there. Then we've got the match with Juventud Guerrera. You didn't
Super Brawl 8.
Yeah, Super Brawl 8. Thank you, Lance. This match was a hair versus mask match. You know, the first match was for the Cruiserweight Championship. Eddie Guerrero won the Cruiserweight Championship at Fall Brawl. He would go on to lose it to Rey Mysterio in another match that we've covered already that was exceptional. Chris Jericho at this point had turned heel. When he fought against Eddie, he was a face. At this point, we see Chris Jericho doing top-notch, phenomenal heel work. And in my opinion, Chris Jericho has always been best as a heel. Would you say the same thing, Lance?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it fits him like a glove.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, like, you watch the match with Eddie, and while it was a phenomenal match, nothing really stuck out about Chris Jericho aside from, you know, maybe his appearance being a, you know, fit, athletic, long-haired, blonde guy. Okay, you know, they call him the Lionheart. I mean, but what really was his gimmick? I mean, he was just a guy. You know, by the time that he's doing his heel work, he's a cowardly and comedic villain.
Yep.
Okay.
Obnoxious.
Yeah. Funny. He could get heat.
Marty Jannetty, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, he could do just about anything as a heel that he wanted to. This match, you know, he did the cowardly, you know, all the stuff that wrestlers do. He does a high flying move, and he tells the camera that I can fly too, because you know he's fighting Juventud Guerrera. Great match. My only complaint about it, and I said this about Rey Mysterio, I think unmasking Juventud harmed his career in a way that was irreversible. Rey Mysterio was unmasked, but was able to keep a career, especially when he went to WWE and they said, put the mask back on.
Yep.
Juventud never put the mask back on again that I'm aware of. The match was a great match, but while it is memorable for the stipulation, I just think that I didn't understand WCW's logic during this time. Why bring in these great luchadors with the marketability of the masks? And kids love it, fans love it. It's part of the luchador culture. Why bring in these luchadors only to turn around and unmask them? That's taking away a big part of what makes them special.
Yeah.
Now, of course, some luchadors did well in their career after not having their mask anymore. Eddie Guerrero is a great example of that. To me, it was usually an unnecessary risk of unmasking these great luchadors. So that's my only complaint about the match, was the stipulation of losing the match. There was a feud after this match with Juventud, with Dean Malenko. And I think it was Chris Jericho's most significant feud in WCW. They wrestled a match earlier in the year, and then Chris Jericho was actively trying to avoid wrestling Malenko again. He won the Cruiserweight Championship again, and then he does one of the greatest promos in WCW history. I recommend listening to the entire promo. I mean, it's long. It lasts even through a commercial break. Long story short, he acknowledges that Dean Malenko is called the man of 1,000 holds, but Chris Jericho says that he's counted them, and he knows 60. Meanwhile, Chris Jericho, he counted his holds, and he's got this huge list going to the ground. He counted his holds, and he knows 1,004 holds. And I read and something online about where he got the idea for that. He did borrow that idea from something else, and nothing in wrestling is original.
Right.
Okay. The best things aren't, in my opinion. If you try to do anything original, it usually goes wrong. You need to stick with what works.
Yeah.
And so,
Unless you're Tony Storm.
yeah. And Chris Jericho goes on this list of holds. About half of them are made up. So he's like, arm drag, arm bar, the moss-covered, three-handled family credenza.
The Saskatchewan spinning nerve hold.
Arm bar.
About every fourth or fifth hold was arm bar.
Yeah. And he gets to like over 700. And he's like, I'm getting blown up. And this is like after a commercial break and everything. So his best promo in WCW, one of the best promos I've seen in WCW. And I'm like, this guy's on the bottom of the card. How is this possible? And this is the thing that Chris Jericho was doing before he even got to the WWE, which was sports entertainment.
Yeah.
He was doing the whole Vince McMahon model of sports entertainment before he even showed up in the WWE. At this point in WCW, they were still doing the more realistic approach with the NWO and the gangs and, calling people by their names and just all that kind of stuff was going on in WCW. And that worked for the time, but like Chris Jericho, he was being a villain, but he was also being comedic.
Yeah.
And I think that approach didn't help him that much in WCW, but it would skyrocket him when he goes to the WWE. At Slamboree of 1998, there is a luchador or a cruiser. It wasn't a luchador. It was a cruiserweight battle royal. Of course, a lot of the guys were luchadors. It might have been a luchador battle royal. I can't remember. But anyways, at the very end of the match, there's a masked wrestler, Syncope, and Juventud Guerrera. Juventud self-eliminates himself from the match, and you'll find out why watching the match. Turns out that Syncope is Dean Malenko under a mask. So he finally has his hands on Chris Jericho, and they wrestle an amazing match. And in my opinion, the second best match of Chris Jericho's WCW career. Now, I understand that Chris Jericho's best work wasn't in WCW as far as matches. It was WWE and in Japan and maybe AEW. But these matches were phenomenal, and they're worth looking back on. So, a wonderful match. Dean Malenko comes out on top in the feud, wins the Cruiserweight Championship. Lance, do you think that WCW made Chris Jericho, at least initially?
Yes. I think WCW made him a star, and WWE took him to the highest level. He was already, if you were watching wrestling, you knew who Chris Jericho was. When he came into WWE, when he debuted, no one didn't know who it was.
Yeah.
Everybody knew who it was. So yeah, he was already a star, of course.
Well, they gave Chris Jericho a huge push from the very beginning. I mean, anybody that watches wrestling, anybody that's watching this right now is going to remember that. If you've watched wrestling around that time, you're going to remember the big, huge countdown to Y2J. And you're going to remember like when it finally counted down on Raw, and then you hear the break the walls down music.